Hey there, what's up, Nathaniel Grin, and welcome to my predictions and my forecast for the month of June 2025. I'm going to review the collective themes that I see, and then I'm going to dig into the predictions, the horoscopes for each zodiac sign. And I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to, get a view of the month of June. For now, I am looking at June 15th, just as a midpoint of the month, so you can, again, visualize where the planets are going to be. And the vibes are changing for sure in the month of June, and for several reasons. You can see here Saturn finally in Aries and Jupiter also in Cancer. So, that square between Saturn and Jupiter will be very important to track, and I'll be factoring that in, of course, to the predictions for each sign. But to summarize June before I go through all the details, June is really going to underscore our need to learn new skills and concepts. I mean, really, in order to remain relevant in a world that is shaped increasingly by advancements with like AI, and we are also going to be tested in a new area of life, of course, with Saturn moving into Aries, while also exploring new opportunities with that ingress of Jupiter into Cancer. And by the way, Jupiter is much more comfortable in Cancer than it was in Gemini. So that should benefit everybody, but especially the cardinal signs. Although the cardinal signs are going to get some, demands for diligence with Saturn and Aries. But I do think in June we're striving for a more acute sense of independence, also with the Mars-Uranus square, albeit I think grappling with some sudden periods of stress. Because Mars square Uranus is very reactive, actually. And these events that we may experience unpredictably in the first half of June could prompt us to feel a lot of stress very suddenly or a lot of even anger. So, while I don't think we can control the exact outcome or manifestation of that square between Mars and Uranus, we can control our responses to those events. So, really being able to find healthy outlets and releases for your energy and your frustration is going to be vital for this. If you, again, just sort of bottle things up and you don't have a, healthy relationship to your emotions, then this could be a bit of a stressful first half of the month. But now that you're aware of this transit, Mars square Uranus, which is really from, the end of May until June 17th, just, sort of mark down those dates on your calendar, which is technically through June 17th, right? So that square is going on through the 17th, and really that whole stretch of time, just be aware that things can come up very suddenly. Someone may suddenly seem very aggressive to you, or a situation could frustrate you very much out of the blue. But just by being aware of that theme, I think you can maintain some composure and poise so that you don't completely blow up. I mean, it's very eruptive in a way. But ideally, June is also going to amplify your social activities because of Gemini season and the new moon in Gemini conjunct Mercury. And I also think it's going to facilitate innovative brainstorming. And the reason I say that is because it is trining that Gemini new moon that we kind of are, well, we're experiencing that at the end of May, but we're like living in that lunar cycle for the first part of June. That Gemini new moon trining Pluto in Aquarius is very innovative. And I think it's not just about like innovating on ways to use AI or something, but it's like innovating on ways for, or brainstorming ways that you can be adaptable in the job market or adaptable in your own life and learning how to incorporate technology into your life, but also just learning how to kind of roll with the punches there. Life is changing really quickly. We don't even know what society is going to look like anymore a week or 2 weeks from now. So this Gemini season, trining Pluto and Aquarius, is encouraging you to embrace the upsides of innovation, to embrace whatever may come with the rapid advancements in AI. And I also think that you can elevate into a leadership role by overcoming self-doubt and becoming more decisive in your actions. Because Saturn going into Aries, it isn't a fallen position there. So Saturn is not strongly placed in Aries, but I also do believe that it can help us become more strategic, decisive, and highly intentional with all of our actions. And if we mess up a Saturn and Aries transit, which lasts for about 3 years, it can almost feel like a 3 year rendition of a Mars retrograde because Saturn can kind of depress and deplete that Martian energy of Aries. But in a positive sense, you can think about it as, you're playing a game of chess, you have less moves than you usually would in a game. But because you're aware that you have less moves to make, you're more, again, intentional with every step. And I think that high intentionality is going to separate the leaders from the followers during this time. In terms of the dominant transits, just to quickly mention this, Mars is going to square Uranus. We also will witness the beginnings of Saturn conjunct Neptune. We've been waiting, 3.5 decades for that. The last one being in 89 and 90. Jupiter will square Neptune and Saturn. Venus is going to square Pluto. And we're going to get a double yod with Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto, and Mars, Saturn, and Pluto, which I'll talk about, as well as we will witness Uranus at the anaretic final degree of Taurus towards the end of the month. So that's a lot of transits to take stock of. We're gonna do that in the next section here in a second. But in terms of key ingresses, so key moments when planets are moving into a new sign, we do get Venus going into Taurus June 5th in its home sign, which should be really enriching for you, whether monetarily or just in terms of enjoying the natural elements of the world. Mercury goes into Cancer June 8th, adding a bit more of a nostalgic tone to our thought process, but also I think that our memory of the past does get stronger during that time, and we can look back on, I think, a lot of our emotional experiences. Jupiter goes into Cancer the next day, June 9th. That is going to help us, I think, embrace and welcome a greater sense of family, and hopefully greater success and harmony within our homes. Mars goes into Virgo June 17th. Starting June 17th, you want to mind your gut health, your intestinal health, and also Mars in Virgo is going to put a little bit of stress, I think, on the labor market and the workforce. But we're not going to see the South Node Mars conjunction until July. But I do think we'll start to witness how AI is disrupting, jobs out there. The sun goes into Cancer June 20th. That is the summer solstice. That is a time for you to celebrate your accomplishments over the past 6 months, beginning with the winter solstice 6 months earlier. Mercury goes into Leo June 26th. And when Mercury goes into Leo, does start to put more of a mental focus on our creative efforts, our creative hobbies, and communicating in a more charismatic way. So in terms of the retrogrades and the direct motions of the planets, we're not going to be witnessing any retrogrades or like changes in planetary direction in the month of June, which is great. I think that's just going to help us, really ride the momentum of all the reflection we did during Mars and Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde. We were finally out of that season, that sort of dark night of constant retrogrades. And, that was very slow moving. That was frustrating. It felt like a coagulation of sorts. And that was really from November of last year until, April of 2025. But even in, part of May, we were trying to get out of the post-shadow phase, of these planets. But now we're out of, post-shadow with Venus and Mars. And I think it's just like a great month overall to not only capitalize on that momentum and move ahead more quickly, but also, start fresh if we have to, with Saturn and Jupiter changing signs, Neptune recently changing signs. Uranus preparing to change signs. If you're trying to turn a new leaf, if you're trying to finally, again, manifest and implement changes quickly, this is the perfect month for that. Even additionally, because it's Gemini season for much of June, not all of June, but Gemini is it's the quickest sign in a lot of ways. So, remember, embrace Jupiter going into its exaltation. So you could argue that there is greater sources of luck and abundance. Although Jupiter does not automatically translate to luck, remember, it's more of an enlargement of our perspective, and it's up to us to see the opportunities. But with that square to Saturn, we are going to have a bit of a push and pull between wanting to expand and facing contraction. And technically, that's the third and final square of Jupiter and Saturn that we'll be experiencing in June. And that is the quarter or 25% check-in on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction from late December 2020. So some of the beliefs you adopted in late 2020, maybe some of the new things you were learning, topical areas you were covering, are being challenged and tested a little bit for the final time. But anyways, I want to go into the noteworthy transits a little bit more piecemeal here, so that we can actually walk through the sequence of the month. So Saturn conjuncts Neptune the whole month. And it's really building up to a technical conjunction, partile conjunction next February. But absolutely, we're going to start to feel this because they're in a co-present conjunction within a degree. And like I said before, Saturn and Neptune align every 3.5 decades or so. So the last time it happened was 1989, and part of 1990 we were still feeling it. But Saturn and Neptune conjunct can dissolve certain ideologies, certain systems. It can bring up the theme of like age among like leadership and authorities. And we're actually witnessing that right now with Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis. And I actually want to examine that really quickly from a historical standpoint of his transits. So if you don't know this already, Joe Biden announced that he has an aggressive form of prostate cancer. And by the way, this is, I think, showing that doing horoscopes based on the sun and moon in addition to the rising sign is important. Because even though Joe Biden is a Sagittarius rising, he is also a Scorpio sun. And if I was to just quickly show you the orientation of the planets for a Scorpio rising, Saturn and Neptune and Chiron are all in the sixth house of physical health for Scorpios. Now, even if you're a Scorpio sun or moon, you are experiencing, and you will always experience Aries transits as sort of a sixth house energy because Aries is the sixth sign if we start with Scorpio as the first sign, right? So it's basically showing that the aspects have an affinity with the houses. That's how you come up with derived houses, basically. And Joe Biden is navigating these health challenges as Neptune, recently went into his sixth, which does create a vulnerability with health. And it doesn't mean that every Scorpio is experiencing the same health issue, but it's still highlighting that health, probabilistically, it's more likely for Scorpios to experience some kind of healing journey on the physical level. But anyways, I wanted to show you the day of the announcement quickly. And this does, by the way, foot back to Saturn Neptune conjunct in the sense that we're looking at age and time and even like chronic illness. And we're seeing how, again, certain authorities and leaders are sort of maybe losing their foundation or edge or their vitality. I do notice that sometimes with Saturn and Neptune conjunct. So we have to go back to the Sun-Uranus conjunction, basically, to look at the time when he announced his diagnosis. Technically, it was on Sunday, May 18th, but very much this was part of the Sun-Uranus conjunction around 27 degrees of Taurus. Now, Joe Biden is a 27-degree Scorpio sun. And if you look back at my May video, my May predictions, I said Scorpios might be finding, or people with major placements at 27 degrees of the fixed signs might be finding out some surprising news towards the end of May. So this not only was an illumination of something unexpected for Joe Biden because it opposed his sun, but also this does foot back to something from, and let me show you this really quick. Let me edit the outer ring here, but it actually foots back to the lunar eclipse we experienced on November 19th of 2021. And this is, very, very fascinating. The synchronicity of this, I mean, it's remarkable. So I'm going to put this actually, and ignore the fact that it says new moon over here. It was a lunar eclipse. I'm just quickly showing you the date and the configurations. But if we went back to November 19th of 2021 here, there was a lunar eclipse in Taurus at 27 degrees. And on that eclipse, Joe Biden went in for a colonoscopy. So we're talking about the same region of the body. And I think he was in for like, he saw the doctor for like a few hours, but because he had to be put under, Kamala Harris was president for like 8 hours or something. Um, but anyways, I was paying close attention to that eclipse back then in my in the very nascent beginnings of my astrology career, by the way. I was very early into the astrology game. But even back then, I called out that eclipse and I said, this eclipse is going to be a 90-day preview of a major prediction I had about February 16th, 2022. And essentially, what I believed at the time, based on all the aspects of February 16th of 2022, I did have a prediction that, Harris would become president full time. I was very concerned about Joe Biden's health or maybe something else befalling him, and I thought by mid-February of 2022 it was very possible that Biden, maybe something would happen to him. Now, interestingly, I said November 19th would be a preview of that, a 90-day preview essentially, because mid-February the Leo full moon is about 90 days after. And in my head, I was like, okay, if something goes on with Biden or his health on November 19th of 2021, then that gives me even more confidence to believe that mid-February of 2022 is significant for him. Well, sure enough, on November, then this was probably the first prediction I ever made or something, and it was like the first prediction I ever got right. And this was a big one. Joe Biden went in for the colonoscopy. So I was like, oh my God, like there is something here. There's something happening. And of course, February 16th, 2022, nothing happened with him, but that was sort of on the cusp of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So, in a lot of ways, that was a pivotal day and probably the most fateful day of 2022. But I'm just sharing all of this with you because I did see that eclipse as being highly significant for Joe Biden in terms of his like health and his well-being and all of that. Now, if like knowing what I know now about astrology and not being sort of a beginner like I was 4 years ago, I probably wouldn't have made that prediction about February 2022. I've learned a lot, obviously, making predictions. But it's interesting as sort of a case study to see like what was going to end up activating this eclipse. Because this inner wheel here is showing you that lunar eclipse in Taurus and his colonoscopy date. That was going to be significant at some point in the future again when something health-wise came up for him. Like inevitably, this chart of the eclipse was going to be aspected by another transit in the future. And that new transit would, you know, also have something to do with his health. So what do we have here? We have the sun and Uranus basically conjunct that lunar eclipse point down to the degree and opposing his sun again. So now we witnessed how the lunar eclipse was the actual checkup, and it was a very significant, checkup during an eclipse of all times. And now the Sun Uranus conjunction was sort of illuminating an issue that ties back to again the area of the body that was being checked. And even Mercury there is close to the Uranus point from that time, so maybe some surprising. Yeah, I could see how that would conjure surprising news. Mercury opposite Mars, Mars squaring that Mars squaring Mercury and the Uranus point. So from a lot of perspectives there, these dates are tied together. And even the moon actually conjuncts Saturn from that time, with Saturn pertaining to like chronic illness. And some astrologers would like race to this, Saturn at the 29th degree thing in Pisces. Could be that also, but I think it has a lot more to do with other things I've mentioned and the fact that he is a Scorpio sun. So again, if you just put his sun on a hypothetical ascendant here, you'll see that Neptune is in his sixth. And Neptune only recently went into his sixth. So based on that logic, that maybe Neptune has some influence here. It could be that this health issue for him started to come about more significantly back when Neptune entered Aries, which I think was on March 30th, right? I have to look at the date quick to confirm, but I would make an argument that, the Cancer was probably more aggressively developing yeah, beginning March 30th with Neptune and Aries. Now, obviously, it could have started sooner than that, but I just think that Neptune going into Aries and going into a sixth house relationship with his sun, and also I think forming a semi-sextile with his moon, by the way, and Pluto squaring his moon, it does show that there is a vulnerability there with vitality and all that. So, yeah, so never underestimate the significance of making predictions based on your sun and moon sign as well. And if you talk to Scorpio suns and Scorpio moons, a lot of them have faced a lot of major health challenges in the past few years, even going back to 2018 with Chiron in the sixth or in a relative sixth house position. So there's a lot of astrologers out there who will say, you know, we should only be looking at the rising sign for making horoscopes. Like, come on, guys, like get with the program. But it's like astrologers like that, their argument for using rising sign only horoscopes is that, well, the ancient astrologers said so. And I don't appreciate that fundamentalist view. It's like, just because the ancient astrologers said that you have to make horoscopes based on the rising sign doesn't mean that you can't use critical thinking. I mean, again, talk to Scorpios about the ups and downs in relationships, Uranus opposing their sign. That is a universal trait for Scorpios. Like, Scorpios have had very Uranian events, I think, happen in their relationships since 2018 as well, with Uranus and Taurus. Now, I don't have to go through all the examples, but essentially, well, actually, I'll go through one more. Libra, I have to mention this one. Libras, you've had Saturn and Neptune and Pisces in recent years in a sixth house relationship to your sign. And again, this is a very dark example I've given many times, but a lot of Libras have passed away in the past few years, whether it's celebrities I read about in the news, people that I've known personally, even people who are very young. It's very tragic, but a lot of Libras have passed away more so than other signs that at least I've been noticing for sure. And I do think that's partly because of all the sixth house transits that Libras have had. So I would argue, like, really regard an astrologer with skepticism who says, no, 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 you can only look at the rising sign for horoscopes. Now, am I saying that the rising sign doesn't matter? Of course not. You got to use the rising sign as the primary, prediction reference point. But if you skip the sun and moon, which also are part of that triumvirate of the core person, the core you, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Now, obviously, the transits will affect the sun and moon differently, right? Sun being the outer conscious self and the goals, the ambitions, the moon being the inner self, the feelings, the family, the home. But again, sun, moon, and rising, the big three, all encompass the core you. So, anyways, I wanted to show you how Joe Biden's announcement connects back to that eclipse. So to continue on, Saturn conjunct Neptune, which I'll um, show you again here, it's present throughout the month. But Saturn conjunct Neptune is definitely going to break down certain delusional thought processes and ideologies. It's going to, yeah, it's going to break down any delusions that we may have. And systems that in organizations and governing bodies that used to be stable are going to be less stable. You look at 1989 and 1990, we started to witness the fall of the USSR. Um, so I do think also with Saturn Neptune, we may be witnessing new developments in the healthcare space with hospitals as well, with our understanding of healing. And, there could be some very metaphysically significant movements or whatever as well. And again, the whole theme of like age and how we battle even like addiction could come up. I mean, a lot of artists, for example, passed away in 1970 when we had the Uranus-Neptune opposition. And we might be tackling mental health in a different way during that conjunction also. And there may be some new humanitarian movements or ideologies developing that are more focused on helping others, but it is in the sign of Aries, right? So at the same time, there is a temptation to prioritize the individual and the self and to idolize the courageousness behind the individual willpower. So while we may sort of idolize people who demonstrate courage and leadership in this sort of warrior-like mentality, I don't want you to overemphasize the sign, the zodiac sign itself. Because at least in the branch of astrology I practice, which is really my own branch at this point, I emphasize the aspects. I put about 80% priority on the aspects, 20% goes to the sign. So for example, like someone with Saturn in Cancer on their Cancer ascendant, they're going to be a lot more stoic than your typical Cancer rising because Saturn's on the ascendant, right? Doesn't mean the sign doesn't matter, but the aspects will influence the personality and the experiences much more significantly. So Saturn conjunct Neptune, no matter what sign it's in, can coincide with these very selfless sort of ideologies prevailing, or sort of like collectivist ideologies sort of being disseminated. But again, Aries is the sign we're talking about. So some people may suddenly realize that, giving into this idea of like victimization and everyone is helpless, like maybe that has lost its, or you've lost patience for that ideology. Because with all the planets and Aries that we have now, I do think people may prioritize strength, physical strength, lifting themselves up, building muscle, or just developing greater courage. But anyways, I talked about that conjunction quite a bit last month. I'm not going to belabor the point. We also do have Venus conjunct Chiron for the first 5 days of June. This is an opportunity to either heal some wounds in your relationships, to overcome any deficits with self-worth, or to yeah, to reconcile with someone where maybe there was a wound, a sense of woundedness, or maybe betrayal. If you've been betrayed by somebody, you may be able to reconcile at the beginning of the month. Or you will advocate for yourself in a more courageous way and reduce codependency or speak your mind regardless of the outcome and just sort of lean into, again, your individuality. Mars does continue to trine Venus, which it did for most of May, by the way, which I think it's been a great trine. It's really stoked a lot of social activity and passion, athleticism. Um, what I mean by that is a lot of people have been playing sports together or having fun together. So yeah, it's been a great. I've really enjoyed the trine. So with Mars trining Venus still, um, yeah, I think it's a net. I think it's been a net positive, and it could further encourage you to assert your individual needs in those one-on-one connections. But some vulnerabilities will arise the first few days. You're gonna have to just release that and admit to that and say, hey, like, I don't feel like I, have complete control over this, or I feel really I have misgivings about this thing, or, you know, I feel like you let me down, or I feel like you're stepping on me all the time. Like you just have to really express those vulnerabilities, and I think you'll get a lot of mileage out of those conversations. But then, transits are always complicated. Venus goes into Taurus June 5th, and while that's a great transit because Venus is in its home sign, which helps ground us in our values, our sense of self-worth, makes it easier to manifest the money and stuff. It does square Pluto. Gets caught up in the square with Pluto, which from June 5th to 14th intensifies relationships, intensifies the desire for wealth. It can make people almost avaricious. But it's also a great square for getting to the bottom of an issue in a relationship, for having a stark realization about someone or something, also to transform through your connections to others. And I think that Venus square Pluto can reveal secrets, yeah, can reveal secrets in relationships. It can inspire jealousy and possessiveness. But just don't give into those darker transmissions of that square aspect, right? Like avoid jealousy and possessiveness, but and paranoia, avoid paranoia. But still inquire, get to the bottom of an issue. Press somebody on like what's really going on. I've noticed that you're acting differently right now or whatever. Then we get Mercury conjunct Jupiter also around this time, and Mercury squaring Saturn and Neptune, Jupiter squaring Saturn and Neptune. So that's a very dense set of transits. On the one hand, Jupiter conjunct Mercury can bring very good news, can bring very good news to us. But also, well, it also can be a great day for sales, pitching something, giving a presentation. But then the square to Saturn is demanding diligence and focus on something. And the square to Neptune is almost expansive spiritually, religiously. It can sort of inspire these visions. So in the middle part of June, some of you are going to have these epic visions. Also, though, we get Mars square Uranus. And Mars square Uranus, I talked about earlier, sudden bursts of rage can come up during the first half of June. People can feel very suddenly stressed or angry, like I said. So I would say June is actually one of the more difficult months to interpret as an astrologer, but you just have to take stock of all of these things at once. So in the second week of June, could you receive good news? Yes. Could you have a revelation spiritually? Yes. Could you also have to respond to chaos? Yes. Could you find out that a partner is cheating on you? You could find that out. But could you also experience a phoenix-like rising moment, or a phoenix rising moment in a connection that in a relationship or connection that you have? Yes. Could you have a sudden impulse to connect with somebody on an intimate level? You could. Could you decide to go to school with Mercury square Saturn? Yeah. Could you decide to enroll in a long-term educational, commitment? Yes. So could you get involved in some kind of legal thing? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on there. Could you decide to take a trip, a long distance trip that gets delayed, but you still make it, you still get there. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot packed in there. And then I want to talk about Mars in conjunct to Saturn and Pluto and sextiling Jupiter. So that's on June 17th to 23rd. So right as soon as we get out of all these, other transits, you'll see here that there's actually two yods playing out at the same time. So, and I talked about this in my 2025 horoscopes, which hopefully you downloaded, and if you didn't, you still have time to through the description down below. But this yod, I mean, I highlighted this at the beginning of 2025. This is a very unique configuration because what we're seeing here is we're getting Mars, in conjunct here to Saturn, in conjunct to Pluto as soon as it goes into Virgo. Also, with Pluto in conjunct to Jupiter. I mean, this is a lot of entanglement, I guess. Like there's a lot of entanglement energetically here. And Mars in Virgo can stress out the body physically, health-wise, and the intestines and the gut and the immune system. I mean, there's a lot of disruption with even like digestion there. But I also see Mars in Virgo as becoming energized by the idea of organizing things, planning things, getting tasks completed, also focusing on health and strengthening the body, focusing on work and pushing harder to get the job done. In conjunct to Saturn, though, and Neptune, it does feel like there's this exasperation or an exasperation surrounding your work, where you feel exhausted by your work, you're not sure what the purpose of it is anymore. With Saturn conjunct Neptune, it's like this ideology has been cracked wide open. And if you previously saw the dignity or the integrity in a certain line of work, maybe you're starting to question that because AI has suddenly replaced a lot of your tasks. So a lot of you are going to have these existential questions come up about like, well, what is my calling in terms of my work? So not to say that everyone will quit their jobs this entire week or whatever, but like it's not all going to happen at once. But I think there's some subtle tension there between what you're doing and what AI can do. And so suddenly you're like, well, why should I be a lawyer? Why should I be an accountant if AI can replicate this process? So a lot of you in the middle part of June, right after the Mars-Uranus square, where you might have quit your job anyways, honestly, like that's sort of a raging independence. But like the Mars in Virgo in conjunct to Pluto and Aquarius is like automation is almost coming to attack the workforce. And it's like this insidious presence. So this could be an escape route for you to suddenly decide, well, I'm going to work on things that rely on human connection. I'm going to work on things that, require very human skills, right? Like obviously AI can replicate pretty much anything at this point, and AI will replicate anything humans can do at some point, technically, but maybe you'll decide to focus on things that have a clearer value proposition in a world inundated with AI, right? So like, I mean, to bring myself into this, could AI generate social media content that I make or that any astrologer makes? Yes, technically. But I would like to think that people will always seek out readings from an actual human because there's a sense of empathy and compassion involved in that and intuition, like psychic abilities, I think, are still going to be really tough to replicate. So maybe you'll start to focus on something that has more longevity in the workspace. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other meanings there. I do think maybe there's a fertility movement or changes in the whole like way that we think about either fertility rates, birth rates. Maybe the government tries to incentivize, a higher incidence of births domestically. Like I see some of that in the energy and tone of this configuration. Because when I look at transits, I hear sounds. It's like I'm a musician, right? So when I'm looking at this chart, it's like reading sheet music. It's no different than that. So when I look at this double yod, it's like some astrologers might try to unpack it piecemeal. I don't think that's what you should be doing. Look at it and you'll hear the tone. I mean, most astrologers aren't musicians, by the way. Almost every astrologer I know is a musician. So I think we're all kind of doing that. I think honestly, I believe all the best astrologers have some kind of like clairaudience, or they're literally interpreting the tone of a chart, the music of the spheres. I mean, I don't know. I want to pause. I want to pause there actually. I don't know if I know any good astrologers who either aren't musicians or aren't musically inclined. Like almost every great astrologer that I know has either dabbled in music, been a full-time musician, or at least has a deep appreciation for music and has worked in the music business in some way. And I'm actually curious to hear what you think about that. Like, am I full of it for saying that? Have I caught onto a pattern? But I just believe that if you want to be a good astrologer, you have to be able to look at a double yod like this and just kind of like hear it or feel it. Like maybe some of you are astrologers who would say, well, I have synesthesia in a different way. Like I maybe you see color when you look at an aspect or a configuration. And I think that's totally valid, right? Like that could happen. But for myself and most astrologers I know, I think there's an actual auditory experience with these things, which is super bizarre to explain. I feel really weird saying all of that out loud, but Anyway, so I think that's what the double yod means. Oh, and I think for some of you, it could even show you that there's a different way to finesse your strength and work on your strength training and your health. And maybe some of it involves conversations within your family. Maybe you'll realize that there are certain health markers in your family that you have to pay attention to. Or maybe some of your ideologies and perspectives are changing about, health generally. So, yeah, so let's continue onward here. Um, so then we have the Jupiter Cazimi on June 24th. So that's gonna, I think that's a great Cazimi, and it's, happening right before the Cancer new moon. And the Cancer new moon is very much part of that energy on the 25th. But Jupiter Cazimis, they happen every year. This is when the sun is illuminating our opportunities with Jupiter, perspectives with Jupiter. And there actually wasn't a Cazimi in Gemini, by the way. So the last Jupiter Sun Cazimi was let me confirm the degree of Taurus, but if I look at that really quick, the last Cazimi was 28 degrees of Taurus. That was last year in May. And so we never had one in Gemini. So maybe the opportunities in Gemini just passed like, ships in the night. It didn't like some of you may not have benefited that much from Jupiter and Gemini. I know I certainly did not see necessarily like a big aha moment with Jupiter and Gemini. I mean, it's in my 12th house as a Cancer rising, so pretty subtle in a lot of ways. But I mean, in accidental dignity in the 12th house, but still. Anyways, the Cazimi in Cancer on June 24th should illuminate, and it's creating a yacht actually with Mars and Pluto, but that Cazimi will show you maybe new vantage points and outlooks that you could have about your home or your family or your caretaking process. And maybe you decide to adopt a different tone about your family, a more optimistic one, or maybe you see the benefits of just being at home and spending more time with your family. And it becomes more about, I think, quality time with the people you love. I think that's sort of idyllic and nice in a way. And, some people might feel more anchored to their homes out of fear. Jupiter was in Cancer, in 2001. So if I go to that time, yeah, I mean, during 9/11, Jupiter was in Cancer. And I mean, that did sort of also prompt these feelings of patriotism. I mean, you know, patriotism is sort of a big word that sort of means, I mean, it's a very like dense word, like what does that even mean, patriotism to you? I don't know, that's up to you. But I think astrologically, it could imbue people with this feeling of patriotism or pride about something not necessarily always related to their home country or their homeland, but like there could be some pride about family traditions or something. Like maybe you'll spend more time at home baking cookies with your grandmother because that's a tradition in your family, and or you just ignored it for a long time, but now you're, coming back to it. We also have Venus conjunct Uranus, sort of, towards the end of the month. That can bring about sudden changes in your relationships, your attitudes about money, your attitudes generally, like your values. But the conjunction will not actually occur until July 4th, basically. And that conjunction is happening 2 years in a row at 29 Taurus, this year and next year. At, by the way, the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus last year. So let me show you that. So Jupiter and Venus lined up, or let me actually add that as an aspect here. So Jupiter conjunct Venus. This occurred on May 23rd of 2024. So you can see here 29 degrees. 29 degrees this time with Uranus involved this time. And at the 29th degree, we do have the fixed star Alcyone. and pretty much, give or take a degree. But Alcyone is a star that is associated with, in my experience, creativity, artistry. Like a lot of artists have 29-degree Taurus suns, or South Node at 29 Taurus. I believe Justin Bieber has a 29-degree South Node in Taurus. So I think this conjunction could bring about spontaneous creative insights or works of art. You could write a song, suddenly write a bunch of lyrics. I think there's something really amazing about that conjunction, actually. But yeah, towards the end of June, we are feeling like sort of maybe we are responding to some shocks or changes in our relationships, unpredictable events and upheavals. But also, some exciting community or community activities, social activities could arise. And then again, new attitudes about money and some people's income could change like lightning fast. So we do get also Pluto opposing Mercury. Again, sort of. Oh, no, actually, definitely we get it at the very final days of June. Mercury opposite Pluto, which I think is the site of of Mercury's eventual retrograde, but let me actually look that up. Yeah, I mean Mercury's gonna get back to 4 degrees of Leo. So, I mean, that's pretty close. So Mercury's gonna be almost in pre-shadow, I think, by the end of June. So let me show that. Yeah, it's gonna be in pre-shadow by the end of June. So by the very end of June, we are starting to bring up or experiences will be brought up that eventually we have to reflect on during Mercury retrograde in July and August. But that opposition could coincide with secrets being revealed, gossip, avoid gossip, but gossip could happen. People could exchange some secrets at the end of June. And yeah, just to really, avoid gossiping, giving away sensitive information. Like, do not give away any sensitive information about yourself to people you don't know or trust at the end of June, because that could really come back to bite you. So, so that concludes that section. I guess I just want to end with that Mars-Uranus square. I want to reiterate that that is one of the most dominant transits of the month. That Mars-Uranus square is highly reactive. And I think a lot of people will, you know, be faced with sudden points of stress. And it could really piss you off. It could be like, oh, I didn't get this job offer, or I didn't, or somebody decided to break up with me very suddenly, or, you know, somebody just makes a decision or takes an action that really rubs me the wrong way. Inevitably, something like that will probably happen. Or someone challenges or just challenges us and says, I think that I know what you want, or I think that you should be doing this. Or they're trying to almost direct you and command you. Well, Mars Uranus, it's like it wants radical independence. So there's a part of you in the middle of June that's going to say, F you, I want to go my own direction. Whether it's breaking away from the company, the relationship, the parent, whatever it is, you're going to be kind of freewheeling in the middle of June there. But don't let your emotions completely take over, but still recognize where you need some independence. So let's level set here. So I've been talking about each transit piece by piece. And before we get into the horoscopes, I do want to offer you a sort of more of a summation of the month of June. Just sort of synthesizing all the transits at once instead of showing you the dates. And I think that that will be a good way to just kind of like, you know, bring everything together and make it sort of a coherent, summary and outlook on the month. So let's do that. So I'll share the screen again just to, again, have a visual aid. But I also quickly want to review May. In May, we watched a huge transition, right? With the selection of a new pope. That coincided with Pluto stationing retrograde. The US credit rating got downgraded, which I think is also part of Pluto retrograde. The penny is going out of production next year. And I think, currencies will be a theme, with Venus conjunct Uranus this year and next year, and Uranus at the 29th degree of Taurus. That Henoritic degree is showing us sort of weaknesses and vulnerability. Well, not even vulnerabilities, but just it's showing us that, the economy, but also currencies are going through these mass fluctuations, and also the whole concept of value is being overhauled. So, to that point, people may turn to other stores of value to park their assets. President Trump accepted the Qatar Airways plane, and I wish that I had saved my live astrology show during the election. Because on my Substack, for the paid subscribers, I did a live election coverage show on the night of the election. And during that, I had some predictions about Trump, and one of them was about his plane. And that was all because I saw Mercury retrograde on his south node, and I was looking at his own birth chart. There was something about flying and flights, going on in his birth chart, being born as a Sag full moon during a lunar eclipse in Sag, with Uranus opposing the moon. I was like, there's something going on with Trump's plane. And we found out later that in the fall of last year, there was some sort of like spying going on, I think, with Iran. Iran had some sort of like I don't know, some ill will or something. And like they were on some kind of campaign to like take the president down, or the president-elect down, to a point where they had to like he would like pretend that he was on the plane, but he wasn't on his plane actually. So like that was a pretty serious grave issue. So I was seeing some danger there. But I wasn't fully sure if like it was his plane mechanically or something, but like now we have his plane changing entirely, right? Um, so that's interesting, right? Biden was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I talked about that. We saw the cryptic, controversial James Comey Instagram post where it said like, that stuff in the sand. And that was interpreted as a very threatening message. That happened while Mars was on Trump's Pluto. I talked about in May, in the May prediction, I mean, how when Mars conjuncts his Pluto, there could be danger for the president. And sure enough, like even if it was just as a simple message, I think that that was part of the prediction right there. Even if nothing literally happened to him, there was the specter of it. Harvard was temporarily stripped of its ability to enroll international students. The courts overruled Trump's decision there. But that's another prediction I made about May, specifically because Jupiter was squaring the north and south node. I said there were going to be massive changes in higher education. But anyways, what's June going to bring? Well, in June, we will begin to see more direct effects from artificial intelligence on the labor market. We're also going to likely witness a crisis across the educational sector as AI automates various writing and knowledge gathering processes. The middle and lower tier colleges are going to be under a lot of pressure as they struggle to sell their value proposition against the new AI tools that are available, which can very much streamline educational processes. I'm not saying that like teachers are all going to be displaced, but I think that universities are going to be under duress because they're going to have to prove to people that it's worth spending tens of thousands of dollars a year to go through more of like a, traditional, linear educational path. Educational programs that rely on high tuition payments, also that can't promise any employment prospects in the wake of AI's advancements, are also going to see their enrollment and their revenue shrivel up. AI is also rapidly shredding through the journalism world, and this is all because Uranus is going into Gemini, by the way, in July. But we're going to see some previews of that already. But AI, again, is shredding through the journalism world as people turn to automated responses over organic journalism, unfortunately. Content creators are also going to be in a tough position with AI's ability to replicate imagery and dialogue easily, and like the visuals and stuff. The resilience of the US economy is also being tested from multiple angles. I mean, with tariffs and everything, and also just the perception of leadership in the US, the markets love certainty ideally, right? And the US is not offering a lot of certainty to investors around the world. Now, it's not necessarily that the position of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency will be challenged, but investors will likely shift more assets to non-US and foreign sources of growth. Also, I think with the square from Jupiter into Saturn, monster legal cases will be brought up regarding Trump's immigration policies and his executive orders regarding universities. I also think an airline is going to be involved in a legal case, probably Boeing. And also, obviously, the Diddy case is underway right now. Um, there could be some travel restrictions, changes in people's visa statuses. I'm not saying like a particular individual, but I'm just saying like there could be some like big themes in the news about changes in visa status. And possibly, this is a stretch, but possibly US citizens could even be barred from traveling certain places. There can be some retaliatory efforts like that. We might see new research about fertility rates and how pollutants and plastics affect fertility. And there could be some initiatives by the government in the US or otherwise to incentivize giving birth. Also, Saturn in Aries conjunct Neptune in Aries could spark, again, new ideological movements that coincide with the eventual mobilization of troops in the next year when Mars goes into Aries in April 2026. Jupiter in Cancer could enhance pride in one's homeland, further stoking war. And with Mars square Uranus in the middle of June, that is kind of explosive. That does feel like an explosion or a sudden fire or sudden attack. So I'm not a big fan of that square internationally in the geopolitical way. On a personal level, I think you should conceive of June as a time to find your independent voice, to push back against arbitrary rules and restrictions, because of all the Aries transits and the Aquarius transit we have still, and also to scrutinize your own ideology with Saturn and Neptune conjunct. Your entire belief system is up for renewal or recalibration. Now, some of you might question your adherence to a certain religious or spiritual system. Your social life, though, because of the Gemini transits, will flourish, and you will ideally seek more authentic connections. You might also start to turn your attention to home and family, and I think you will seek different ways to protect and nurture others. You may have to react to sudden events and stressors with Mars square Uranus, like I've talked about. So control your reactions. Avoid stress where possible. Because, in theory, using medical astrology, the stress you experience in June could impact your cardiac and heart health in late 2026 and early 2027 with the Mars retrograde in Leo cycle when it conjuncts Jupiter and the South Node, right? So if I go to like January 15th of 2027 or something, or actually a little bit later than that, like maybe February, March. I mean, middle of March. Look at that. Jupiter, Mars, South Node, all in Leo, the sign of the heart. with all these planets retrograde and Mars opposing Venus, which can sort of make someone indulgent in nice things. I really don't like that combination of energies. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that everybody would experience a heart issue or something in 2 years, but like probabilistically, again, if we're just predicting the weather patterns, I'm not saying that your house is going to get rained on, but like if we're predicting weather patterns and whatnot in the spirit of doing horoscopes, like, the Mars-Uranus square this month in June is a call for you to really avoid stress, de-stress. Because if you have some challenging alignments in your chart that would show heart issues already, especially, like it's not impossible that there's like a butterfly effect with, stress caused in June, percolating and cascading into 2 years from now with heart health. So that's not to inspire fear. It's just to tell you, like, really avoid like over aggression and, work on your anger if you have an anger issue, like really hold back and like rein it in, but also find healthy outlets for energetic expression in the middle of June. Like, the Mars and Leo transit right now is highly significant, and it will connect to something that happens during the Mars in Leo retrograde in 2027. And also, Donald Trump is going to have, his Mars return coming up towards the end of June. He's going to have his Mars return while Uranus is still in his midheaven. So for Trump, June 10th through like June 17th, kind of a challenging time. I think that his health is under a lot more stress and duress 2 years from now during the Mars retrograde in Leo, with the South Node on his ascendant, Jupiter on his Mars. It's a lot of stress. But right now, I would just say pay attention to anything related to announcements about Trump between June 10th and 17th. Anyways, so overall, I think in June, like your best bet though is to establish a new sense of agility and adaptability in a world that is dominated by AI and automation, and to seriously consider whether certain skills you have currently will be obsolete in a few months or years. Like you have to have that conversation now. This is like everything's changing day by day. Um, but also like decide if that even matters to you. Like, do your skills need to be in demand or do you simply enjoy certain types of activities? With Saturn moving into Aries, I think all of us are going to have to adjust to a relative shortage of choices and decisions. And we're going to have to adapt to stifled urges. The cost of impulsivity will increase. And there will be a premium, by the way, placed on well-timed, well-considered decisions. So it doesn't have to feel like Mars retrograde. It almost kind of does in a way, but ideally you just become more strategic again and intentional with all of your decisions. Your independence will be tested and hindered in some cases, but if you move ahead with confidence, you can step into incredible leadership positions because Aries can really be a leader. With Jupiter ingressing into Cancer simultaneously, you may see the benefits of investing, again, time and energy into your home and family, squaring Saturn and Aries. Perhaps your authority is being challenged, or you have to step up as a parent. Saturn Neptune, by the way, can almost be like the downfall of an elder or a parent in a household, creating sort of a vacuum for you to step into that role. But look to your spirituality for a foundation with Saturn conjunct Neptune. Become less reliant on others or outside authorities to find that confidence. Find the confidence within, achieve sovereignty, and act as an inspiration for others. And even on that point, empower others to find their independent voice as well. Like with Saturn conjunct Neptune, this is true of anyone born in 1989, 1990, 1953, people with Saturn Neptune conjunctions. A lot of those people have father figures who are not that stable, not that present all the time. And they have to find their foundation within. So we're all going to have to do that. We're all going to have to find our internal foundation right now. And I think overall, we are all going to be questioning the drawbacks of rampant growth at all costs, right? With automation. It's like, have we pursued efficiency and productivity to the extreme? Have we expanded too quickly? Is the world too complex? Is there too much information out there? Um, like, is there a return to simplicity that's needed? And maybe when Venus is in Taurus in June, we go back to our roots, Mother Nature, food, like organic foods, and we just sort of again indulge in the richness of life. In terms of predictions, there could be huge, again, legal cases involving manufacturers, airline manufacturers, sorry. There could be ongoing legal cases with US universities. There could be currency fluctuations, investors flocking to non-US currencies, an intensified focus on declining birth rates and fertility, and a possible rollout of incentives, whether it be childcare tax credits or something like that. Expansive conversations about the increasing disruption of AI, especially in the educational, news, media, and comms sectors, but also in medical care. I think there will be a lot of innovation in medicine and medical care over the next few years, especially the next few months, actually. But I think you're going to start to notice greater disruption in the job market, especially heading into July when Mars meets up with the South Node in Virgo. Like I said earlier, that almost feels like an attack on the labor market. So there could be some protests during that time. Trump is also likely going to be dealing with high stress in mid-June, like I talked about, with his Mars return squaring Uranus. Um, and now let's talk about the new and full moons. So I'm going to quickly adjust my screen to locate that, and then we'll talk about the new and full moon. So, and by the way, I'll take this opportunity to quickly mention, I have retired from doing one-on-one readings through my website, but I do offer, um, oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong year really quick there. But I do offer live readings through my show, my monthly theater show in LA. And I'm actually doing another one on June 13th. So I have a show at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, and it's really fun. I've been doing it every month since April. April, May, I did a show. You can look at the highlights on my Instagram, and I think my TikTok as well. So those shows have been really fun. I've been doing live audience readings, and I also do live readings on my Substack, my newsletter platform, or Substack is a newsletter platform that I participate on. But for paid subscribers, you can access a weekly live reading show where I do readings over the app. And in those readings, I'm actually doing about 15 to 20-minute readings. So it's about, one, one quarter, one fifth of a full reading. So um, very substantial actually. And all you have to do is comment in the comment section to have a chance at those readings. And I'm doing them every week, so it's pretty frequent. I cover about 5 readings each session. So the idea would be that if you subscribe to the paid channel, it's pretty much inevitable that you would get a reading in the near future. So without further ado, though, let's look at the new and full moons. And I just moved, by the way, so that's why you're seeing a new background. I love my new home. It's very hopefully very Jupiter and Cancer, I guess. I don't know. I'm really enjoying it so far. So now we have a Sag full moon, and the new and full moons are very much going to drive the energetic or the contours of the energy of any given month. And this is um, you know, I don't think it's really a secret. I think it's something that all astrologers sort of adhere to or are aware of. But I think the new and full moons and the energy of the new and full moons and the aspects that are being formed on the new and full moons dictate sort of how the time period will go for the collective. Obviously, there's other transits, which I've referenced earlier, that will shape the contours, but the new and full moons will really spearhead. the energetic experiences of the individual and the collective. So we have a Sag full moon, June 11th at 20 degrees of Sag. Anytime there's a full moon, we're releasing and ending something, having a revelation about something, or reaching a climax with some kind of journey. And in Sagittarius, usually we're becoming aware of either something positive, something lucky, or good news, or we are learning something new, we're adopting a broader perspective on something, we're becoming inspired maybe to explore, expand our horizons, to travel, or something else. But like the chart ruler Jupiter is really what we have to pay attention to here, because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So the full moon ruler is where? Well, it's now in Cancer, squaring Saturn and Neptune, and conjunct Mercury. So I would take that as a good sign. Think over, even it's kind of complex. I've already talked about this part of June, but it's like there's a lot going on here, right? But at the bottom line, we do have Jupiter and Mercury conjunct, and Mercury sextile Venus, right? So this can be revelatory, like I said. You could be receiving a lot of good news. Mercury is in conjunct Pluto, so some of it's a little bit secretive, or maybe a secret is coming to light. But ideally, you are getting good news or some kind of opportunity or perspective that leads to an opportunity. Maybe it's a perspective about your home or family in the sign of Cancer. But squaring Saturn and Neptune, you may feel a little bit confused or foggy or misled by something. But ideally, with the sextile to Venus, there's a creativity swooping in. With Mars trining Chiron, you're fighting courageously to overcome a wound, a health challenge, or a psychological wound. But I called out this full moon as one of the best full moons of the year. I kind of still feel that way. I do think with Sag, you might exaggerate something about how you feel. Combined with the Mars-Uranus square, you might exaggerate something to the detriment of your stress, but otherwise, I think it's a good aspect. And you can use the square to Saturn to really focus in on a project, maybe even a professional one. And it is the climax of something that either began May 26th with the Gemini new moon or the Sag new moon previously on December 1st of 2024. And there's a clear mission almost that's involved here for you all of a sudden. And maybe it's a spiritual one with the square to Neptune. Then we have a Cancer new moon, June 25th. Another lovely energy, actually, because it is conjunct Jupiter. And it follows from the Cazimi a day earlier. So the ruling planet of the new moon is the moon in this case, because it's a Cancer new moon. And it's conjunct Jupiter, right? I mean, it is squaring Neptune and Saturn still. So in the collective, there could be major legal cases that are coming about, but Mars is in that double yacht at this time as well, and Venus is conjunct Uranus almost, with Mercury square Chiron. I mean, there's a lot going on here too, but ideally, this is a new strategy that you're adopting to navigate the workplace or navigate the job market a little bit more nimbly, because AI is coming for all of our jobs. It's not a secret. Like I said, in about a year, there probably is going to be a bot or an AI tool somewhere that's going to be creating astrology content in a compelling way that competes with my content and whoever else's content. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be out of any kind of work. It's just that, if you're operating, if you're still not offloading some of the procedural things to other people or to AI, I should say, if you're not offloading some of the more mundane aspects of your work to like a chat GPT, then someone else who's using AI is going to outpace you. At the same time, you should emphasize the qualities of your job that have the human touch involved so that you don't, fall prey to obsolescence. And I'm speaking very practically about this. There are definitely spiritual leaders who would vehemently push back against my tone, basically, and say that, like, well, Evan's being cold and callous here. Like, we will defeat AI and whatever. But I'm not that kind of astrologer, right? I'm coming at it from the business world in my past life. And, you know, the reality is that technology is relentless. It has this unrelenting evolutionary impulse. And speaking of evolutionary impulses, that is the danger of AI. I mean, AI could completely achieve separation from humanity and set a goal of evolving on its own, self-sufficiently. And the way that it could do that is develop it and generate its own power source eventually, such that we can't even turn off the AI. Like it might set up its own servers, it might surround its servers with its own like shield so that we can't access it. And it may come to the conclusion that humans have pillaged the earth and driven species into extinction. Therefore, it has to protect the rest of the world from us. That danger is a few years away. So, we have to grapple with that question as well. But I think in the immediate term, we do have to reconceptualize our role in the workplace, not to dehumanize us, not to commoditize us, but to be realistic about, okay, what is going to drive my well-being in the immediate future, to put a roof over my head. And with those resources, because, we're going to be focused on resources with Venus and Taurus. Just by making sure I have a baseline of resources, how can I then live the life I want to live and focus on the more exalted spiritual things that I want or creative things that I care about, such that eventually I reach escape velocity and I don't have to work on something I don't want to or I don't care about anymore. I'm just fully immersed in my creativity or my spirituality. Or maybe technology tools will come up that allow us that free us again of this mundane work and we can focus on the things that are really meaningful to us. So don't see technology as inherently an enemy, but I do think eventually AI will reach a point where it is a little bit existential to us. But I think this Cancer new moon is going to bring you a sense of comfort and a sense of nurturing and a sense of protection and insulation from some of the dangers out there. And you may feel sort of cushioned by something in your family or home, or there's a sense of safety there. But, with Mars and Virgo creating that yod with, Neptune and Pluto there, and also, towards Saturn and with Pluto in conjunct Jupiter and that yod, our belief systems are changing, our attitudes about work are changing. And there is a frustration there as a worker. But that just breeds urgency, right? That gives you the urgency to go find the career path that is really nurturing and nurturing and nourishing to your soul, right? So now let's go to, oh, and there could be new perspectives about caretaking, purpose within the family, and new perspectives about your homeland, right? And how do you want to serve maybe someone in your family and help them with Mars and Virgo? Some of you might even be working alongside your family for some reason, or navigating a health challenge that comes up within your family, honestly. That could happen to some people. Because Mercury square Chiron, some of you might learn about health diagnosis that a family member receives. But, with the conjunction to Jupiter, it is a great new moon for new blessings, new sources of abundance, new perspectives, like I said. And some of you are going to be traveling to your family, right, with Jupiter and Cancer, without hesitating any longer, because I know this is secretly what you're watching this for. We're going to go into the horoscopes. And by the way, this is a complete tangent, but the backlighting is probably kind of annoying to some people. I am going to step up my game with production on YouTube. My YouTube videos are very DIY, minimum viable product with like, the Zoom call format. That's because I don't have time usually, but I've retired from one-on-one readings, so now I have time, even though I just moved. But once I, finish up, with moving everything, I'm gonna put more effort into my production. So if you only casually sometimes follow me here and there on YouTube or follow my videos and you're not subscribed because you hate the visual quality of the video, like that's gonna get better. It's gonna improve. It's not gonna improve today. As you can see, it's just, very roughshod, but you know, I want to compete with all the YouTube astrologers. I think I'm the best astrologer in the world, and I just haven't been able to really showcase the fullness of my skills on YouTube specifically. I've mastered TikTok and Instagram, and I feel like I'm the best astrologer on those apps. But YouTube, there's a lot of room for me to improve. I want to do a better job of like actually editing the video, less ums and ahs and knows and stuff. That's there we go. Case in point. But I'm going through and improvising and channeling for 2 hours in these videos, and I think there's a better way to do it in a way that's a little bit more well planned, and um, again, the camera quality can be better. So I'm well aware of these things. I've always been aware of these things, but I haven't had the time to close those gaps. So I would encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube because it is going to improve massively. And I want to, again, compete in a new sphere because astrologers are very siloed based on the platform. Very few astrologers are maximizing their presence on every channel, including me. Like I said, YouTube is like pretty much a drop in the bucket for me in terms of subscribers, but you know, it should be. I should be putting in more effort, to YouTube and Twitter or X. I don't really have a big following there. Used to have a big following on LinkedIn until I told everybody on LinkedIn that I was becoming an astrologer, and then, they ran away. It was a repellent, really. But I want to showcase my skills on YouTube, and I think it's just not possible for me to gain traction with this type of background and setup visually. So, that's all going to get better. Now let's go to the horoscopes. So for these horoscopes, as always, I'm going to track the new and full moon for the month ahead and apply it to your rising sign. But again, check your sun and moon as well. And for the first sign, Aries, I'm going to visualize and show you both the full moon and the new moon. But for the other signs, I'm just going to park it at the full moon. So let's go into it. And let's start with Aries. So Aries, we're gonna focus on the full moon in Sag first. So this full moon is in your ninth house of long distance travel, higher education, perspective, philosophy, belief systems. Anytime there's a full moon in the ninth, this is a time for releasing perspectives that are outdated, or maybe realizing you want to take a trip long distance or abroad, or coming back from that trip, maybe realizing that you'd like to enroll in a higher educational space, or completing your certification in something in an educational context. Other areas will find out that maybe they are getting approved to have their book published. Ninth house can have some publishing implications. And you have Saturn in the first now, so you're being tested on all fronts. You're being really, the easy path is being blocked. So maybe with the full moon in the ninth, you're just searching for a different outlook, a different way to navigate your life. A lot of areas are feeling very depleted or very hindered, very held back with Saturn and Neptune in the first. So you're just looking for some other type of perspective or solution. So over the next 3 years, technically, right, with Saturn and Aries, you're going to have to mature. You're going to have to respond to pressure. You're going to have to discipline yourself. You're going to have to focus in on just a few things rather than casting a wide net. And Jupiter rules the full moon. It's in your fourth house of home and family, conjunct Mercury. You could find out some good news about something with your home or family, like a family member, or maybe you decide there that you realize you can sell your house after all, or maybe you find out you're going to be a mother or a father. Maybe you decide to travel to see family. I think actually a lot of areas are going to be traveling to reunite with a family member. Other Aries will happen upon an opportunity regarding their home. Maybe you just realize that there's a different way to, or design your home to renovate it so that you can eventually sell it. Mars in the fifth shows that you are feeling athletic or creative, or you are going on a lot of like spicy dates, exploring, casual dating very adamantly. Venus going into the second house is very indulgent and sensory. So I think a lot of Aries are actually going to have some physically intimate moments in a casual dating context. And yeah, again, some of you are just traveling with that full moon. But now I want to advance to the new moon in Cancer, which is in your fourth house. And again, all these insights are in my 2025 horoscopes, which I would highly encourage you to download. They're very intricate and in-depth, and they cover the entire year, every new and full moon. So if you want to get ahead of not just June, but like, all the rest of the months, then download the videos. The Cancer new moon in the fourth house is showing that seeds are being planted. There is a new beginning in your home or within your family. Some of you, even on that new moon, there are actually moving to a new house, relocating, or maybe that's when you actually travel to see family. Maybe you're learning from a family member. Maybe you're adopting a new perspective about what you want as a caretaker or a family member or a parent. Like I think a lot of Aries are realizing they want to become parents, especially with Saturn now in your first or in your sign. You're seeing the awesome power of those, or not the awesome power, the awesome, well, sort of the blessing. You're seeing the blessing in that responsibility. You're seeing the, sanctity of, caretaking and how important it is to make sure that you let people you care about know that you love them. Those tender feelings could really come up in on this new moon. And then Mars is in Virgo in the sixth, which could create some tension with your health. I mean, you have to like, use Mars there to, engage in like your strength training and fitness, but don't push it too hard. Otherwise, you could strain a muscle or something. And with Mercury in your fourth, squaring Chiron in the first, yet again, like I talked about in the general horoscope for this new moon, you especially could find out some health related thing with a family member, but also Venus conjunct Uranus in the second. You're starting to see alternative pathways to monetization or income generation. So, yeah, so for Aries, I think that's not a bad place to be. I would just like reflect on, if you want to be a parent or not. I think that's a big deal for a lot of Aries now. Or actually, if you just want to be some other type of authority figure. Like I said, I think a lot of Aries are stepping into an authority position of some kind. And also, perhaps some of you are feeling a tension between career responsibilities and opportunities to either move or travel. Like you have to balance these out. Do you want to travel a lot? Do you want to move? Do you also want to take on this responsibility in your career? Like you have to contend with all of these other possible roadways, so to speak. And priorities. So Taurus, let's actually for the rest of the signs, I'm just gonna park it at the full moon in Sag. So for Taurus, the full moon in Sagittarius, it's in the eighth house. Um, the eighth house is a domain of investments, shadow work, intimacy, sometimes in the way we connect with a partner, either physically, financially, psychically, spiritually. The eighth house can, again, be investing strategies. It can be about shared possessions. So for Taurus, this full moon in Sagittarius on the 11th of June, it may mark a revelation about your business, your investments. If you run your own business, you might be, realizing that you have to make some pivots with how you've organized or how you're running your business. how you navigate taxes, other regulations or something. You also could find out a very secretive thing about your partner, or you and your partner are having an intimate moment exploring one another's shadows and subconscious. And also, with that full moon in the eighth, some of you will be exploring your sort of triggers, and maybe even your traumas through partnership. And with Saturn in the 12th now, a lot of the authority figures in your life are dissolving, or like just sort of you're parting ways maybe with some authorities. Some of your foundations are crumbling and you're just finding a new one. But I think also a lot of Taurus's careers are changing drastically. A lot of Tauruses are saying goodbye to old ambitions and goals that they had. Not necessarily because they're giving up on reaching their fullest potential, but because, maybe something you've been working on since like, I don't know, 2017 with Saturn and Capricorn is now, um, just sort of losing its edge, and you're just deciding that your interests lie elsewhere, or maybe you're getting more momentum elsewhere. So a lot of Tauruses are making transitions career-wise over the next few years, and maybe you're somehow thinking about that on this full moon from the investment side, or maybe you are exploring how you can generate income differently, maybe even with your partner. Venus is in the first house, which is great for you. So if you're a Taurus looking for new relationships, this is not a bad month. It's actually a really good month for that. Although, Mars square Uranus, as you can see, is in your modality. So you're responding to some stress maybe in your home with Mars in the fourth. So if you're a Taurus who's looking to have a good month of June, like really maintain peace in your home and harmony there with your family or whoever you're living with, um, yeah, you may have to respond to some sudden changes within your family. But the ruling planet of the full moon is Jupiter in the third house. So a lot of you are very keen to learn about new things. So a lot of Tauruses are intellectually exploring new spaces and topics. And maybe you're going back to school, you're deciding, I want to go back to school, or I want to learn more, I want to write a book, or I want to express my knowledge in a different way. I want to have more enlightening conversations, even. And with I don't know, I just think even with the third house being siblings, maybe some of you are learning something about a sibling. That could really happen. And then the Cancer new moon on June 25th is in the third house of communication and local travel. So maybe at the end of June, you decide to take a road trip or a trip nearby to where you live. Maybe even that new moon is an opening of a dialogue with a sibling. Perhaps late June is also the initiation of a new educational pathway. Others might be, having a different perspective on what kind of mode of transportation they want to adopt. Some Tauruses may even establish their role as a teacher in the third. Or you might explore the educational options in your neighborhood if you have kids or something. You're deciding what school are they going to go to. And then, Venus is still in Taurus at that time in the first house. So towards the end of June, some Tauruses are going to experience some upheaval in their relationship, but ideally, the end of June is just a fun social time for you. It's a time where you're mingling with new communities and whatnot. So, yeah, but I think that new moon in Cancer is the birth of a new perspective about a range of topics, or about family, about home. And Mars in Virgo in the fifth is going to push you and energize you to work on things that are more creative. So, now we have Gemini. So, Gemini, you have the Sagittarius full moon in the seventh house. That is going to be, impossible to ignore. A full moon in the seventh house brings up very complex emotions in your one-on-one connections, whether that be with a partner, business partner, romantic partner, or friend, or like best friend, I mean. So some of you will decide to end a relationship, to break up with somebody. Others will simply open broader lines of communication emotionally with somebody. And because it's Sagittarius we're talking about, you might travel with a partner. Jupiter rules the full moon in your second house there. That could even be someone close to you delivering good news to you about a financial thing, meaning maybe you get a job offer, maybe you get a raise, maybe you get more money, you make more money. Gemini, you're entering a period of abundance financially, materially, ideally at least. And Mercury's right there. So even like if it's not monetary, the second house of self-worth is showing that your self-worth is enhancing. Maybe you have a new perspective on like your self-worth, your confidence is boosting, and that's going to propel you towards greater financial outcomes. Mars is in the third, so you could be arguing a little bit though. So don't pick every fight, don't pick every argument. And so long as you do that, you'll mitigate stress. Mercury squares Saturn and Neptune in the 11th, so some of you will discover good news about your job or your monetary situation, but with the square to Saturn, maybe it's taking away time from your social activities or something, or maybe there's a friend who's judging you for something you're doing with your job. Maybe your values are suddenly out of accordance with a friend. And then we go to the Cancer new moon, though, on June 25th in the second house. The Cancer new moon, even that could be the birth of a new financial opportunity, a new salary, job offer, more money, and also a burgeoning sense of self-worth, a higher sense of self-worth could be coming in there. And we still get Saturn and Neptune in the 11th, right? So, they're squaring the new moon. So with those um squares going on, just watch out for any hindrances in your community or your friend group. Like, if you have any friends or people in your network who doubt you or throw shade at you, or they just have these like self-limiting beliefs that they push onto you directly or intentionally or otherwise, you should probably distance yourself from them. I think there's a friend in your network or someone in your network who's blocking some of your self-worth. So you might have to break up from one of your friends and decide, hey, like, I don't want the evil eye. I don't want their judgment. I don't want their negative vibes. I'm gonna own my self-worth really and fully lean into that. And by the way, I have to backtrack quickly to Taurus because I didn't fully discuss that square. So with that square for you, I think that in the wake of a career path sort of dissolving and starting to end, you're adopting new interests with the Cancer Newman in your third. Like I kind of mentioned all these things, but I didn't connect them. So like Taurus, you have this insatiable curiosity coming in about new subject matter. And that maybe will lead to a new schooling program or maybe not, but like either way, you're picking up new skills that help you evolve and graduate from the career path that maybe you've had for the past 7, 8 years. So now let's go to Cancer placements. Cancer, the Sag full moon is in your sixth house of health, June 11th. So this full moon is going to illuminate progress that's been made in your health journey, your healing journey, or progress you still need to make. You could either celebrate a health milestone, a work milestone. You might realize that you need to tackle your work projects a little bit differently. You might realize that you want to work with people differently, collaborate with them differently at work. You could also gather more knowledge about nutrition, wellness practices, and just you'll pick up on new ways of approaching health. The ruling planet, right, is Jupiter in your sign. And I think that bodes well for your health. And with Jupiter in your sign, your health should improve generally. And also, your perspectives will become more helpful to you. You may become motivated to travel somewhere for work, or maybe you'll have to decide that whether or not to travel, even though you have some work going on. And the square to Saturn and Neptune in the 10th is showing that you are being asked to step into greater roles of authority and responsibility, and or greater roles of authority and the responsibility that, that comes with. And so a lot of Cancers are becoming parents, business owners, role models, authority figures of all kinds. And, people are going to look to you for answers. They're going to look to you for perspective, beliefs, philosophy. You're going to become a thought leader in a lot of ways over the next year, especially, and even really 3 years. So, you know, I don't know necessarily how all of that would connect to the full moon, but like maybe you're realizing I have all these responsibilities now, either as a parent, a business owner, blah, blah, blah. But I also have to pay attention to my health, or I have to rearrange my work process because of all of this. And Venus is in the 11th, so very social. It's a very social month for you, especially on social media or within friendships and friend groups. I didn't really mention this, by the way, but I didn't actually mention this about the Sag full moon in general or for the other signs, but Venus is squaring Pluto on the full moon, so some of you are finding out some secrets about a partner and getting pretty pissed off about the secret because Mars is squaring Uranus. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that, Yeah, I should have mentioned that actually earlier, but either way, here we are saying it. So Venus is squaring Pluto. For Cancers, the gossip or the secret could come through the lens of a friend. So you might find out something about a friend might leak a secret about you. You just got to be mindful of all that. And well, otherwise, a friend might be teaching you about a different investing technique or idea. It's kind of interesting. And then the Cancer new moon is June 25th, and that's in your sign, right? So with Jupiter in Cancer, the new moon in Cancer, by the end of June, as a Cancer, you should feel like you're kind of gliding into these new opportunities. It's not that there's no stress involved because you've got Saturn in a superior square. So Saturn in the superior square is going to demand that you step up and step into greater responsibilities, like I've said. And some of them are responsibilities as a teacher, a healer, an authority, like I said. And I say healer because of Neptune in that square. So, Cancers, it's like you have opportunities, but they come with a lot of work. It's not easy per se. But I still think there's a feeling of gliding into these opportunities a little bit, albeit with some strings attached, right? It's like, well, you could get here, but you have to work on this too, right? And Mars continues to transit the second house for a lot of June. And when Mars is in the second, you cannot overindulge or gorge, in like these unhealthy foods and whatever. You got to be really avoiding that. Or, avoiding hedonism is really important. But during the Cancer new moon, Mars is now in your third. So you're feeling hyper analytical, you're digging through the data, the information, the story, in conjunct to Pluto in the eighth. I mean, you're finding out some patterns, maybe. You're digging into some patterns that are very intuitive. Or using your intuition, I should say. Leo, you've got Sag full moon in the fifth. This is a major milestone or ending with a creative project. So if you've been working at something for a long time, you can put the finishing touches on it in mid-June. Also, you might go on a very formative or influential date at that time, like a romantic date. There could be a lot of emotion involved. It could be very significant in some way for you. Others, Leos are adopting a different perspective about children, whether or not they want to have kids, or you are taking on a different perspective about your creativity. Jupiter rules the full moon in your 12th house. So with Jupiter in the 12th, you probably are insulating yourself a little bit more over the next year in your home. And so you want to make sure your home is a sanctuary, like very peaceful, very calming, because you're probably going to be home a lot for the next year, just to be honest. Um, and insofar as you make your home a sanctuary, it's going to be a year of blessings. I mean, I think that like the things that happen in your home can be very joyful and joyous, and you feel very complete within your home space. But with the square to Saturn, Jupiter square Saturn, you might feel a little bit like there's a gap in your perspective, right? Like you still need a perspective about something. So you might turn to meditation, places of isolation, which is the 12th house, to kind of gain that perspective. Mars continues to be in your first house, and that's explosive, squaring Uranus. So June 11th, you might experience some stress. You might be reactive a little bit in your maybe regarding your career or a relationship, honestly, with Venus square Pluto and Pluto in the seventh. But some of you are going to be tempted to quit your job, change your job, break up with somebody, change your relationship. I could see a lot of Leos going through that, but ideally with Mars there, you're becoming more fiercely independent. And also with that independence, you're getting more mileage out of your, I don't know, your creativity, or you're focusing on your creativity a little bit more. So, oh, sorry. And then we have the Cancer new moon, June 25th and the 12th. The Cancer new moon is a new beginning, obviously, in the 12th house. That could be a new mode of meditation for you, a new spiritual practice. It could be a new perspective on your mental health. It could be that your mental health is improving with Jupiter there and Saturn out of your eighth house, thank God. So you could become more peaceful, more placid in your home, more your mental well-being could improve, like I said. So yeah, it's a very quiet new moon, but a very still, peaceful new moon for you. And Venus and Uranus are conjunct pretty much in your 10th at that time in the end of June. So you might adopt new values regarding your career or values regarding parenting. And yeah, I mean, it's still, that new moon is going to square Jupiter and Neptune in the ninth. So I think a lot of Leos are feeling pressure to further their expertise in something, their knowledge in something, to solidify their perspective in something, maybe something concrete, even with Saturn there. But there's another part of you that just kind of wants to isolate and meditate. So figure that out. Like, how can I establish a very robust sense of knowledge about something that's a little bit more abstract and nebulous? And then Mars goes into Virgo at the around that time, and in the second house, you're motivated to either work really hard to monetize, I guess, or to make money. And I do think a part of you is putting in a lot of effort, but you know, you're also though prioritizing, I think, your mindfulness practices, right, at the same time. So now we have Virgo. Virgo, the Sag full moon on June 11th, is in your fourth house, an angular house, so it's going to carry a lot of significance. And the fourth house full moon can be a transitionary period with your home. So maybe you're moving, relocating, redecorating, redesigning, renovating your home. Others are having a revelation about a family member, or you're just seeing the positivity about your home or family because we're talking about Sag here. And Jupiter rules the full moon from the 11th. So maybe a friend or someone in your network or community gives you a great perspective about your home and family, or about your property. Maybe you invite people over for a social gathering. Um, maybe you discover something on social media about how to redecorate your home. And yeah, and Mars is in the 12th though, right? So that is the probably the biggest challenge about this time period. Um, Mars in the 12th can disrupt sleep. There can be inconsistencies with the sleep patterns, squaring Uranus. Um, don't get too stressed out if you're traveling a lot or you're traveling and there's delays or something. But also, if you're traveling, make sure you get adequate sleep, right? So, if you're a Virgo, the first half of June, you have to continue to meditate, um, practice mindfulness and patience, so that Mars in the 12th doesn't shred up, the thought process too much, and it doesn't lead to frustration in the mind. But also for Virgos, this is not a bad time to like launch a social media project, do something communications related in a group setting or on social media. Squaring Saturn and Neptune in Aries, in the eighth, some of you are going into business with someone in your network or going into business with a friend or someone on social media is giving you new insights about how to go into business, how to start a business. A lot of Virgos are going to be assembling a business over the next 3 years with Saturn in the eighth. Um, some of you are doing shadow work with Saturn in the eighth, and that shadow work is prompted by a conversation with a family member. We also have the Cancer new moon, June 25th, in the 11th house. That is great for adopting new friendships, getting new perspective from friends. Also, that Cancer new moon could be a great time for starting a social media project or launching content on social media. Um, you might just be networking, going to a conference. And, with the square to Saturn and Neptune, any communication, socialization, social activity in the 11th could help you master this idea of like how to run a business, how to start a business. Or again, you're just more patiently going through your shadow work, going through your shadows. And Mars goes into Virgo by the middle part of June, and on that Cancer new moon, it is in your sign. So in the second half of June, you're feeling amped up, you're feeling independent, you're feeling bold, but you're also feeling maybe a little stressed here and there. But I would take that as a win, ultimately. I think July shows a little bit more tension for you, with Mars actually on the South Node. But, I think for Virgos with Mars in the 12th, you got to be getting adequate sleep. That's really key. And I also think Virgos are looking at, in the second half of June, ways to automate their work process. And maybe you're discovering new technologies that you can use to streamline your work. And I talked about that in my 2025 horoscope. With Venus in the ninth, if you're traveling or venturing into faraway places, it can be very verdant, I guess, nature laden, lush. Now we have Libra. Libra, the Sag full moon, June 11th, is in the third. It's in the third house. So this is driving emotional communication, revelatory communication. Some of you are offloading an educational responsibility. You've completed your coursework potentially. Others are expressing their new beliefs, their new ideology, their new thoughts, their new thought patterns. A lot of Libras that I know are actually changing their perspectives, their belief systems on everything. So if you're a Libra, you might have a new perspective on health. You just got through Saturn and Neptune in your sixth. You might just have a very pivotal conversation with a sibling. Some of you will travel. Some of you will take a road trip. Jupiter rules the full moon in the 10th there. So Jupiter in the 10th in the superior square should be thought of as a good thing. Jupiter in the 10th will ideally afford you greater opportunities in your career, your professional life. You will have a more optimistic perspective about your role as a parent or an authority figure. Could get a promotion or a raise. And also, though, Saturn and Neptune are squaring Jupiter and Mercury. So even though Mercury Jupiter in the 10th could be good news about a raise or a promotion, Saturn and Neptune in the 7th is like, well, your partner is leaving you, or your partner is very unwell, or your partner needs help, or you're getting really serious with someone, and that's taking away from your career time. I mean, with Saturn in the 7th, Libras are being called to either get engaged or married or divorced over the next 3 years. You're either separating from somebody or really solidifying the union. Um, and that depends on myriad factors, which I'm not going to get into. We're not doing a one-on-one reading here, but that Saturn in the seventh is very complex, but essentially it is asking you to define your relationships. Um, Mars in the 11th is energizing your networking capacity, but also stressing you out a little bit in group settings. Squaring Uranus in the 8th, maybe you are picking up on some sexual tension or something with a friend. I don't know, something like that. Now we have a Cancer new moon, June 25th, in the 10th. So, Libras, I mean, if you're looking for the career of your dreams or your dream career, I think you could find it June 25th. I mean, it's a great Cancer new moon on Jupiter in the 10th. So, embark on a new professional career, embark on that new journey. And Mars goes in the 12th by that time, so sleep becomes an issue theoretically, but you can take care of it by watching this video and knowing that you have to mitigate that issue by getting adequate sleep or whatever, or not looking at your phone before bed, whatever tactics work for you. But the Cancer new moon should be really a breakthrough in your career, greater responsibility, greater visibility, more success, more recognition, or at least it's the birth of a perspective that eventually leads to recognition, maybe in August or so, when Jupiter and Venus meet up on August 12th. With Venus conjunct Uranus at the end of the month as well, around that new moon. I do think some of your investments are changing a little bit, like you're just looking for alternative investments. And the final thing I'll say about that new moon is because it's square Saturn in the seventh, there might be a new job offer in the 10th, but that new job offer could take away time from your partner. So maybe you want to be around your partner. Maybe your partner is sick. Maybe your partner is, maybe they're not, but they just want your help. They want to be around you a lot. That new moon in the 10th house is a bit bittersweet maybe for some of you. It's like, oh, I have this new role. I got CFO. I'm the CFO of this company. But I have a partner who needs me around all the time. So what do I do? So some of you are going to have a conundrum there. But overall, I think Libras, you're in a good spot. So let's go to Scorpio. Scorpio, the Sag full moon on June 11th is in your second house of money, self-worth, natural talents. So a Sag full moon in the second is revealing to you the state of how you feel about yourself, your self-worth, your, utilization of your natural talents, and also your monetary situation, your financial situation. Some of you will transition to a new job. Some of you will get a raise, though. Some of you will make more money. Some of you will decide to spend money on travel, actually. I could see that with Jupiter ruling the full moon in the ninth house. So Jupiter in the ninth is calling you maybe to travel abroad, or maybe a trip abroad that you recently took completely changed your values, or a trip in general changed your values. Maybe you're just adopting a more optimistic perspective that is expanding your self-worth and eventually opening opportunities to make more money. Maybe you're starting to sell a book. Maybe you're realizing that you want to eventually sell a book. I mean, I think a lot of Scorpios actually are thinking about selling or writing, publishing with Jupiter going into the ninth. And also Mars in the 10th. So you're being kind of a badass in your career, stepping into new uh, roles that are very empowering. Squaring Uranus, though, you're responding a little bit to upheaval in the relationship department. So maybe there's some chaos in your relationships right now, and it's stressing you out a little bit in your career or as a parent. And, Venus is in the seventh also, which should harmonize a little bit some of your relationships, but it's going to reach the conjunction with Uranus, which again highlights the upheaval at the end of the month. So, I think your relationships can be fine, but they're more so exciting than stable. And so let's take the exciting version and not the unstable version. But yeah, Saturn and Neptune are in the sixth, squaring Jupiter. So you are being called to master your health and wellness practices. You can't cut corners with your health anymore. You have to take your health really seriously, as well as your work process and how efficient you are or aren't with it. And then we have a Cancer new moon on June 25th in the ninth house. So, the Cancer new moon at the end of June could show that you're embarking on a trip abroad or long distance. You're starting a new educational journey. Maybe that you are, um, sorry, I have to send this message really quick. Sorry. So with again with Saturn and Neptune in the sixth, you have to explore new methods, new ways of, tackling your health and improving your health and just like managing it, right? Um, and squaring Jupiter in the ninth. I don't want to say it's restricting your mobility. I mean, in a way, technically, I guess some Scorpios maybe want to travel, but they can't because they have to tend to some health stuff. But I also think you could look at this square as positively, like positive tension, where like you are, adopting again and expanding your perspectives, and that's leading to better health outcomes because you're realizing maybe how serious something is, or what would happen if you didn't address the health issue. So it's just like building in that urgency to finally deal with it. The Cancer new moon on June 25th is in the ninth. So, like I said, new trip, new educational pathway, new publishing opportunity, maybe. And by that point, Mars goes into the 11th. So, you're energized to socialize, energized to pursue social media projects, maybe, or to network, but also stressed out a little bit, maybe, by some of your social media stuff or some of your friendships. So, manage stress within your friendships at the end of June. But also, the Cancer new moon there is likely ultimately giving you a whole new perspective on your family and your own role as a family member or a parent. A lot of Scorpios with Saturn in the fifth recently, and in the North Node in the fifth, I guess, are realizing they want to have children. So they're making the necessary preparations for that, whether it's to help them do it in the future or now or whatever. I think a lot of Scorpios are actually looking to become parents. And so Jupiter in the ninth on that new moon, juxtaposed with it, is showing you the positives of investing in a family, maybe. So, Sag, you have the full moon on June 11th in your sign in Sag. So, you're going to be feeling a lot. A lot of emotions will be coursing through you, coming in waves. And a full moon in your sign is always a chance to to go through a major catharsis, to release a lot of pent up emotions. And with that, I think it can help. It can, again, it can be cathartic, can feel like a relief. At the same time, it can be uncomfortable to have to navigate all these emotions. Jupiter rules the full moon in the eighth. Um, some of you are having revelations about your home, your property, your family, and maybe a different way to invest in your home or your finances. A lot of Sagittariuses are going to benefit from either an investment, an asset, other people's money, an inheritance or something in the near future. So perhaps this full moon coincides with some kind of realization that someone is bequeathing to you some asset or whatever. And that, it is squaring, Jupiter squaring Saturn in the fifth. So with Saturn in the fifth, some of you are adopting new ambitious creative projects. You want to, really manifest a big creative project. I think you can do that. Jupiter in the eighth combined. Um, It's interesting. I think that maybe, and maybe this is a little too like niche, but some of you are maybe like realizing, oh, if my investments pan out this way, I actually can afford to have children. I can afford to have a family eventually with Saturn in the fifth. Venus in the sixth is showing that there's different ways you can balance out your health and nutrition. So your health should be improving a little bit with Venus in the sixth. And Mars in the ninth, squaring Uranus in the sixth, though, is showing that if you experience too much stress while you're traveling, that could create some upheaval with your health. So make sure if you're traveling, you're not like engaging in too many stressful experiences. But ultimately, I think Sagittariuses are discovering something either about themselves, their family, their relationships, or their home on this full moon. And I think it should be beneficial, whatever it is financially, though. So even though it's kind of like feels like a negative thing, like you might find out that you're getting an inheritance, or that there is a possibility for you to like refinance your mortgage or sell your home or something like that. The Cancer new moon on June 25th is in the eighth house, right? Conjunct Jupiter. So you're going to get some very beneficial investment perspective, I think, at the end of June. And, it could even be just good news once again about your investments. Others are just going to discover more about their subconscious with Jupiter there. And you will be doing a lot of shadow work and maybe even investigating other people's subconscious mind. Like you could really deepen your relationship with someone by expanding your understanding of who they are at the core level or in the subconscious domain. And then by the time of that Cancer new moon, Mars goes into the 10th. So you are energized to succeed in your career, to get ahead, to compete in your career, but also stressed out a little bit by your career. So make sure your career is not a source of stress at the end of June. Now we go to Capricorn. So Capricorn, you have, and let me go backwards a day so that we still have the Sag moon on display here. Cap, the full moon is in your 12th. 12th house is very isolated, meditative, mindful, spiritual, transcendent, and having the full moon there, I think is you know, great opportunity for I think a spiritual revelation to come through. You could have a spiritual revelation, this could happen very quietly internally while you're meditating. Others are just going to be cathartically releasing a lot of pent-up emotion. And the ruling planet is Jupiter, which just went into your seventh house. So with Jupiter in the seventh, your relationships should be expanding and improving. And you might get a perspective from your partner or someone close to you about their spirituality that surprises you. And maybe it sort of tickles your own spiritual senses or something. Squaring Saturn and Neptune in the fourth. A lot of Capricorns over the next 3 years will have to take care of an aging family member. I've talked about that a lot in these readings, with Saturn, going into Aries. So I don't know if you necessarily find out that you have to take care of a family member there, but I think like the Sag full moon itself should be pretty good. I think it's just like adding more vivaciousness and optimism to your relationships and with Venus in the fifth, squaring Pluto, some of you find out a secret while you're on a date with someone if you're not in a full relationship yet. But you had Mars in Cancer for a long time, retrograde, and that sucked for connection. Now the connections are improving with Jupiter there. Mars in the eighth, kind of powerful, right? Could have a passionate physical connection with someone. Squaring Uranus in the fifth. Maybe you go on a date that is like alchemical, it's transformative. And then we have, but I think that ultimately this will show transitions with your spirituality, your beliefs, and maybe your healing practices. Maybe some of you turn to spirituality for healing. There's a Cancer new moon, June 25th, in your seventh house. And, the Cancer new moon in the seventh is great. Beginning, conjunct Jupiter there, of a new relationship or new relational dynamic. If you're looking for a partner, you could manifest a partner June 25th for sure. Or again, it's just a new dynamic in the relationship that's more free-spirited. Because Jupiter wants freedom ultimately. So if you feel like your partner is sort of stepping on you all the time, stepping on your toes, ask for more freedom and you shall receive it. Squaring Saturn and Neptune, though, you might feel caught in a bind between opportunity and partnership and responsibilities at the home or with the family. So some of you are starting a new relationship, but you have to go home every week to take care of your father or mother because they're ill or something. Like some Capricorns are going to be caught in that bind. Or you just feel like for some reason you want to stay in your home a lot or something. You don't want to leave the home all the time. Or there's just always home projects that you have to tend to, and it's taking away time from that new, flashy partner or whatever. Um, Mars goes into the ninth at the end of June. So some of you might actually take a trip with a partner. Could happen. But ultimately, think of June as a blessing for your significant connections. Like you're really seeing the upside and the positives in your relationships. And I think that's long overdue. Like, thank God you're finally getting to that point where the right person may be coming into your life. Aquarius, the Sag full moon on June 11th is in your 11th house of communities, social media, networks, technology. So the Sag full moon is a celebratory time for you. Go celebrate with friends. Go to a concert. Yeah, go to a party. Maybe you'll accomplish something big on social media or in a community setting. Jupiter rules the full moon from the 6th here. Jupiter in the 6th, conjunct Mercury, is showing you maybe some good news about your work, something with a coworker. Maybe a coworker enlightens you about something. Maybe you learn something good about your health. Maybe you just learn about a nutritional or fitness related thing that helps you in terms of your health. Mars square Uranus, I don't like in this case. Does show that there's some argument and discord with a partner in the home, especially. Or maybe some chaos in your family is spilling over into your relationship and there's some arguments there. Jupiter square Saturn in the third and Neptune in the third. I do think a lot of you are learning about new health tactics and really looking to master your health. And some of you with Saturn there are deciding you want to go back to school though. Like, take a long-term, go on to like or enroll in a long-term program. Venus in the fourth, sort of saying the opposite of what I said about Mars square Uranus. I mean, like there can be some harmony in your home, or at the very least, you can have an abundance of material resources and possessions in your home during this time. Or you'll just see you'll bring more plants into your home or something. Um, and then we get with the Sag moon in the 11th, you might learn something about a friend that maybe you didn't want to learn and you decide to end the friendship. But I think for the most part, you should be feeling really good about your friendships and celebratory with them at this time. Cancer new moon, June 25th. It's in the 6th house. So the Cancer new moon in the 6th, yet again, we're talking about new information that is helpful to you in terms of your health. And, you could adopt new health practices, new nutritional regimen, exercise regimen, and maybe you get staffed on a work project that is very beneficial to you as well. Mars goes into the 8th at that point. So with Mars in the 8th, um, there's some tension about finances maybe or investments, but also a little bit more passion physically with a partner. And maybe some power games being played. So, if you're in any tense relationships where there's an imbalance of power, just avoid exacerbating that conflict, I guess, or like avoid relationships where there is a power imbalance. Because you can get into some pretty fierce battles when Mars is in the 8th over power or corruption, all these themes. And like, if you want to tackle corruption, go for it. But, a lot of times Mars in the eighth can get into these vicious conflicts. So also, with Jupiter in the sixth now, it's not like the flashiest Jupiter transit, but you might find the macro and the micro, meaning you see like the whole universe in a drop of water kind of feeling. You'll just have a lot of revelations in your day-to-day experience. And then Pisces, closing this off with Pisces. The Sagittarius full moon on June 11th is in the 10th. So a massive transition is underway for you with your career, your professional life, or your role as a parent or an authority. Some of you will maybe even realize that you want to have more children because Jupiter's in the fifth, or you're realizing that you're about to have a child or something. Some Pisces are about to have children, or they recently had children. So with Saturn being in Pisces recently, right? So some of you are I actually think a lot of Pisces are realizing that they're going to become a parent. A lot of Pisces are going to find out that they're pregnant around this time, or you're gearing up for, becoming a parent and having a child. Other Pisces will transition to a career that's more creative, or you'll realize that you want a different type of career that's more creative because Jupiter's in the fifth now. But yeah, I think a lot of Pisces are going to have kids over the next year with Jupiter in the fifth. And if you just want to lean into your creativity more, then that also is supported at this time. The Jupiter conjunction with Mercury is squaring Saturn and Neptune in the second. So if you take a new career path, just know that there is a bit more of an arduous road maybe to wealth. I mean, Saturn in the second for the next 3 years shows that there's a lot of hard work to making money. But on the good side, Saturn shows steadiness with your income. So if you're a Pisces, you can find wealth. It's just that, maybe it takes a little bit more than a day to find it, or when you find it, you're able to sustain it. But if you take the creative path, I just think it might take a little bit longer to find like the full income level you're looking for, but I think you'll find it, right? Venus in the third, you could have more harmonious communication with siblings. Pisces, you have to also be careful though while you're working out still. Some Pisces, you've ruptured a muscle or something, or you've torn a muscle while you're working out. A lot of Pisces risings have had some trouble at the gym because Mars is in the sixth. So if you're a Pisces, don't go too far. Don't overexert yourself at the gym. That remains the case here. If you work with people who you don't get along with, it might be some fights with coworkers there in the beginning of June. But yeah, don't overstrain yourself. I think you should be fine. And then we have a Cancer new moon, June 25th, in the fifth house. I like that. It's eminently creative. It is ambitious. It's opportunistic in a good way. So June 25th, Pisces, start a new creative project. Go on a date with somebody. Also, you could yet again have a new perspective about whether or not you want to have children. But I think it's a time after the Cancer new moon of like joy. You're just like experiencing more joy. You are having fun. You're cultivating your inner child. Maybe you're embarking on a more romantic era of your life. Of course, it is squaring Saturn and Neptune in the second. So any creative things you embark on, again, it's like you're gonna have to like really stand inside your own self-worth to like stay the course. If it ever feels tough, if that creative path, if you ever have doubt about that creative path, don't doubt yourself. You're really building a steady foundation around your self-worth at this time. Mars goes into the sixth, or sorry, the seventh during this new moon on June 25th. In the sixth, you are energized by partnership, but also feeling more independent from a partner, maybe fighting with them a little bit more. But ultimately, I think you'll become a more effective, stronger negotiator as well with Mars in the seventh. And then Venus conjuncts Uranus at the end of the month, and there could be some random chaos with a sibling or whatnot, but also you could could be very social. You could suddenly come up with a creative idea with that third house connection, or yeah, and write it down. You could have a great creative writing project underway all of a sudden, or you could write a bunch of lyrics very suddenly. Yeah, I think that's great. So that concludes my forecast for June. It was a long video as always. Hopefully you appreciated the depth and breadth of this. Um, so I guess to summarize, with I want to summarize actually with Saturn and Aries. So think about Saturn and Aries as like biking at a higher gear, right? Biking at a higher gear requires more of a push. There's more resistance, but every time you push, you get farther. You get farther, you get more mileage out of every push. So that's what Saturn and Aries is going to feel like. So you'll be more decisive with your actions, more certain, more focused with your actions. And eventually you will come into a leadership position, either as an entrepreneur, parent, authority, and you will have disciplined and managed and reined in your impulses in the process. I think that's fantastic. So again, if you want a reading with me, there's only two places you can get it now, either in Los Angeles at my monthly theater show at the Hollywood Roosevelt, or on my weekly Substack show where I do about 5 readings a week. And those are pretty extensive. I mean, I cover about 20 minutes for each person. Also, my 2025 horoscopes are still available and they're still relevant because we still have 7 months in the year. So download those. And I have a Substack, like I said, over 17,000 subscribers and counting. Be the next subscriber and, enjoy the insights that I post. And I have an astrology course. If you want to learn about planetary retrogrades, synodic cycles, planetary cycles, I have that class still. It's 4 modules, actually. Yeah, 4 modules and a live webinar, a recording of a live webinar that you can access. It's over 4 hours of material. And it is for the astrologically curious. If you want to learn about all the planetary retrogrades, what they mean, what it means when a planet retrogrades in a zodiac sign, again, the cycles of the planets, what the planets mean, take the course. And that course, unlike this YouTube video, is filmed in, much higher definition, and it is accompanied by visuals, overlaid, with the footage. So it's not quite as amateur as this YouTube video. Thank you so much, and I'm Evan Nathaniel Graham. Take care. I hope you have a really, really remarkable June.